Bikers harass a woman alone on the road. The shocking truth about her stuns them. The sun was setting over JFK International Airport, casting a golden hue on the bustling terminals below. Travelers from all walks of life were rushing to make their flights, eager to settle into the cramped comfort of the aircraft that would soon whisk them to destinations around the world. Among the sea of passengers was Daniel Wright, a tall, well-dressed black man in his late 30s, pulling a sleek leather carry-on behind him. Daniel was a successful executive known throughout the business world for his strategic mind and sharp business acumen. His rise to the top had been nothing short of extraordinary, from a modest upbringing to running multi-million-dollar companies. Today, however, he wasn't thinking about business. He was exhausted, having spent the last week negotiating a merger that would change the face of global aviation. The deal was done, the papers signed, and now he just wanted to sit back, relax, and enjoy his flight to London, where he was due to meet with his new executive team. This would be his first flight since the acquisition, and he was looking forward to traveling in peace. As he approached the gate, Daniel checked his boarding pass one last time. C2A business class, the bold print read. He had flown business many times before, and though the luxury of first class always tempted him, he enjoyed the balance of comfort and functionality that business class provided. When it was his turn, Daniel handed his boarding pass to the gate agent with a polite nod. She scanned it, glanced at the screen, and gave him a brief but professional smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Wright," she said, handing the pass back to him. With that, Daniel made his way down the jet bridge, stepping into the cool, perfumed air of the airplane. He was greeted by another flight attendant, a woman in her early 40s with a practiced smile. Her eyes flicked over him briefly, and her smile tightened just a bit, but she quickly returned to her professional demeanor. "Good evening, sir. Your seat is just down the aisle to the left," she said, gesturing toward the business class cabin. Daniel thanked her and made his way to seat 2A, a spacious leather chair complete with a blanket and a glass of champagne waiting on the armrest. He exhaled in relief as he placed his carry-on in the overhead bin and settled into the seat. It had been a long few days, and he was looking forward to a quiet, comfortable flight across the Atlantic. He took a sip of the champagne, savoring the taste as he pulled out his tablet to catch up on some emails. Around him, other passengers were still filing in, but the cabin was mostly empty, and the atmosphere was calm. Daniel began to relax, allowing the soft hum of the plane's engines to lull him into a state of contentment. Just as he was about to lean back and close his eyes, a shadow fell over him. He looked up to see the same flight attendant standing beside his seat, her smile now gone and replaced with a look of uncertainty. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice cautious. "Could I see your boarding pass again, please?" Daniel raised an eyebrow, a bit confused. He had already shown his pass at the gate, and no one else in the cabin seemed to be receiving the same treatment. Still, he handed her the pass without hesitation. She looked it over carefully, her eyes darting between the pass and the seat number several times as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. She murmured under her breath before handing it back to him. "It appears there's been a mistake." Daniel frowned, sitting up straighter in his seat. "A mistake?" he repeated. "What kind of mistake?" The flight attendant hesitated, glancing around the cabin as if searching for backup. "It seems that this seat wasn't actually available. There was a system error, and it looks like this seat should have been reserved for another passenger." Daniel stared at her, not quite believing what he was hearing. "But my boarding pass says 2A. I was assigned this seat when I checked in." She smiled thinly, her expression more condescending than apologetic. "Yes, I understand that, sir, but unfortunately, the system made an error. We'll need to ask you to move to economy class." For a moment, Daniel just stared at her, unsure if she was serious. "Economy?" he said incredulously. "You're asking me to move to economy because of a system error?" She nodded, her face stiff. "Yes, sir. It's an unfortunate situation, but we need you to move. I'm sure you'll still be comfortable back there." Daniel's calm exterior began to crack. He had faced situations like this before, where his presence in certain spaces was questioned, where people assumed he didn't belong. But this was different. He had paid for his seat just like every other passenger in the business class cabin. Why was he being singled out? "I'm not moving to economy," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "I paid for the seat, and my boarding pass confirms that I'm supposed to be here. There's no reason for me to move." The flight attendant's expression hardened. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but we really need you to cooperate." Daniel didn't back down. "If there's been a mistake, it's not mine. I'm not moving. I suggest you find another solution." A few passengers nearby were beginning to notice the commotion. Some were glancing over curiously, while others pretended not to hear. The flight attendant's face flushed slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the growing attention. "Please, sir," she insisted. "We don't want to make this a bigger issue than it needs to be." "I'm not moving," Daniel repeated, his patience wearing thin. "If there's a problem, you can take it up with the gate agent or your supervisor, but I'm not going to be downgraded because of your system error." The flight attendant's lips thinned into a tight line. "I'll speak to the cabin manager," she said, her tone clipped. She walked away briskly, leaving Daniel to sit there simmering in his seat, his mind racing with a mix of frustration and disbelief. It wasn't the first time he'd been made to feel out of place in a luxury setting, but it stung all the same. He couldn't help but wonder, would this be happening if he were a different kind of passenger? If his skin were a different color? A few minutes later, the flight attendant returned, this time with a man in a dark uniform, a cabin manager by the looks of him. The man approached Daniel with the same stiff professionalism, though his expression was more guarded. "Good evening, sir," the cabin manager said. "I've been informed of the situation. Unfortunately, there's been a technical issue with the seating arrangements. We're going to have to ask you to move to economy class. We'll offer you a voucher for the inconvenience, of course." Daniel took a deep breath, keeping his temper in check. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not moving. I paid for this seat, and I have every right to stay here." The cabin manager's face tightened, though he tried to keep his tone even. "I understand your position, Mr. Wright, but we're dealing with a full flight, and this seat was mistakenly double-booked. We really need your cooperation." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "So this seat was double-booked, and I'm the one being asked to move?" The manager hesitated for a split second, and Daniel saw it, the unspoken implication. "We're just trying to resolve this as smoothly as possible, sir." The tension in the air was palpable now, and Daniel felt the weight of every gaze in the cabin. He had worked too hard, climbed too many mountains to be treated like this, like he didn't belong in a seat he had paid for, like he was an outsider in a space he had earned his place in. "I'm staying right here," Daniel said quietly but firmly. "If there's an issue, I suggest you find another way to resolve it." The cabin manager's patience was clearly wearing thin, but before he could say anything more, the voice of another flight attendant cut through the tension. "Is everything all right here?" Daniel turned to see a younger flight attendant approaching, her expression concerned but neutral. The cabin manager shot her a warning glance, but she ignored it, stepping closer. "Yes, we're just having a little issue with the seating arrangements," the manager said, clearly hoping to end the conversation. The younger attendant looked at Daniel, then back at the cabin manager. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said calmly, pulling out a tablet from her side pouch. She tapped on the screen a few times, scanning through the passenger list. After a few seconds, her eyes widened slightly, and she looked up at the cabin manager with surprise. "Actually, Mr. Wright is in the correct seat," she said. The cabin manager blinked, his face flushed a deep shade of red. His eyes darted between the screen and Daniel. It was clear that the so-called system error had been nothing more than a mistake, or perhaps something worse. The younger attendant turned to Daniel, her tone apologetic. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, Mr. Wright. You're absolutely in the right seat. There's no need to move." Daniel gave a curt nod, though the frustration still simmered inside him. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight. The cabin manager opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. He simply nodded stiffly before turning on his heel and walking back toward the galley, the flight attendant following closely behind him as they walked away. Daniel leaned back in his seat, trying to shake off the frustration that clung to him. It was a small victory, but it still left a bitter taste in his mouth. He had fought his way to where he was today through a world that didn't always welcome him, and yet even in a place like this, on a plane in a seat he had rightfully earned, he was still made to feel like he didn't belong. But as the plane took off and the lights dimmed, Daniel allowed himself to relax, knowing one thing for sure. In a few days' time, when the ink was dry on the contracts, this airline would belong to him. And the next time he boarded one of these planes, there would be no question of where he belonged. He would make sure of it. As the plane ascended into the sky, Daniel settled into his seat, allowing the hum of the engines to wash over him. He pulled out his tablet again, but his mind was still racing with thoughts of the earlier confrontation. The way the flight attendant had looked at him, the assumptions made based solely on his appearance, it was a reminder of the biases that still permeated society, even in spaces where one would expect to be treated with respect. He opened his email, but the words blurred together as he thought about the implications of what had just happened. It wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had ever been judged unfairly, every individual who had faced discrimination simply because of the color of their skin. Daniel felt a surge of determination. He had worked hard to get to where he was, and he wouldn't let anyone take that away from him. As the flight continued, Daniel found himself reflecting on his journey. He had grown up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, where the odds were stacked against him. But he had persevered, driven by a desire to prove himself and to create a better life for his family. He remembered the late nights spent studying, the sacrifices he had made, and the people who had supported him along the way. He thought of his parents, who had instilled in him the values of hard work and integrity. They had always encouraged him to pursue his dreams, to never let anyone tell him he couldn't achieve something because of his background. Their unwavering belief in him had fueled his ambition, and now, as he sat in business class, he felt a sense of pride wash over him. But that pride was tempered by the reality of the world he lived in. He knew that for many, the journey was far more difficult. He thought of his friends, his peers, and the countless individuals who faced systemic barriers every day. It was a harsh truth, one that weighed heavily on his heart. As the flight attendants began serving dinner, Daniel put his tablet away and focused on the meal in front of him. The food was decent, but he found it hard to enjoy. His mind kept drifting back to the earlier incident, the way he had been treated, and the implications of that treatment. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had a responsibility to speak out, to use his position to advocate for change. After dinner, Daniel decided to take a walk down the aisle. He needed to stretch his legs and clear his mind. As he walked past the first-class cabin, he noticed a few passengers whispering to each other, their eyes darting in his direction. He felt a familiar tightening in his chest, a mix of anger and frustration. Why do they have to look at me like that? He thought. Why can't they see me for who I am, not just the color of my skin? He continued walking, trying to shake off the feeling. He made his way to the back of the plane, where the economy class passengers were seated. As he passed by, he overheard snippets of conversation, some passengers discussing their travel plans, others complaining about the cramped seating. But then he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. A group of young men were laughing, their voices loud and boisterous. One of them said, "Can you believe that guy? He thinks he belongs in first class just because he's wearing a suit." Daniel felt a surge of anger rise within him. He turned to confront them, but then he paused. He realized that engaging with them would only escalate the situation. Instead, he took a deep breath and walked back to his seat, reminding himself that he was better than that. As he settled back into his seat, he felt a sense of resolve wash over him. He wouldn't let their ignorance define him. He would continue to work hard, to strive for excellence, and to prove that he belonged in every space he occupied. The flight continued smoothly, and as the hours passed, Daniel found himself lost in thought. He began to formulate a plan, a way to use his position to advocate for change within the airline industry. He would reach out to his contacts, leverage his influence, and work to ensure that no one else would have to face the same discrimination he had experienced. As the plane began its descent into London, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was determined to make a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been marginalized or dismissed. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it head-on. When the plane finally landed, Daniel gathered his belongings and made his way to the exit. As he stepped off the aircraft, he took a deep breath, feeling the cool London air fill his lungs. He was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that he had the power to effect change. As Daniel stepped into the bustling terminal of Heathrow Airport, he was immediately enveloped by the sounds of travelers rushing to their gates, the announcements echoing overhead, and the faint aroma of coffee wafting through the air. He took a moment to gather himself, feeling the weight of the past few days settle on his shoulders. The flight had been a whirlwind of emotions, and now, standing in a new country, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He navigated through the crowd, his mind still racing with thoughts of the incident on the plane. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had a responsibility to address the biases that existed not just in the airline industry, but in society as a whole. He had seen firsthand how prejudice could manifest in subtle ways, and he was determined to use his voice to advocate for change. As he made his way to the baggage claim, Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out to see a message from his assistant, reminding him of a meeting scheduled for the following day with his new executive team. They would be discussing the merger and the future direction of the company. Daniel felt a surge of determination. This was his chance to set the tone for the new organization, to ensure that inclusivity and diversity were at the forefront of their mission. After collecting his luggage, Daniel stepped outside into the cool London air. He took a deep breath, feeling invigorated by the change in scenery. He hailed a cab and settled into the back seat, giving the driver the address of his hotel. As they drove through the city, Daniel marveled at the sights, the historic buildings, the vibrant streets, and the diverse mix of people. It was a stark contrast to the tension he had felt just hours earlier. Arriving at the hotel, Daniel checked in and made his way to his room. He dropped his bags and took a moment to collect his thoughts. He knew he needed to prepare for the meeting, but he also felt a strong urge to reach out to his contacts in the industry. He pulled out his laptop and began drafting an email to a few key stakeholders, outlining his vision for a more inclusive corporate culture. As he typed, he reflected on his own journey. He had faced countless challenges along the way, but each obstacle had only strengthened his resolve. He remembered the sacrifices his parents had made to give him a better life, the late nights spent studying, and the mentors who had guided him. He was determined to honor their legacy by creating a workplace where everyone felt valued and respected. After finishing the email, Daniel decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He stepped out of the hotel and wandered through the nearby streets, soaking in the atmosphere. The city was alive with energy, and he felt a sense of excitement about the opportunities that lay ahead. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice the diversity around him. People of different backgrounds, cultures, and ethnicities mingled together, creating a vibrant tapestry of life. It was a reminder of the importance of representation and the need for organizations to reflect the communities they serve. Daniel found himself in a small park, a peaceful oasis amidst the hustle and bustle of the city. He took a seat on a bench and pulled out his phone, scrolling through social media. He came across a post about the recent incident on the flight, and he felt a pang of frustration. The comments were a mix of support and criticism, with some people defending the flight attendants' actions while others condemned the discrimination. He realized that this was part of a larger conversation that needed to happen. People needed to understand the impact of their biases and the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background. Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would use his platform to advocate for change, to educate others about the realities of discrimination, and to promote inclusivity in every aspect of his work. After spending some time in the park, Daniel returned to his hotel, feeling refreshed and ready to tackle the challenges ahead. He spent the evening preparing for his meeting, reviewing notes and outlining key points he wanted to address. He knew that this was an opportunity to set the tone for the new organization, to ensure that diversity and inclusion were prioritized from the very beginning. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the office early, eager to meet his new team. As he walked through the sleek, modern space, he felt a sense of excitement. This was a new chapter, and he was determined to make it a positive one. When the meeting began, Daniel stood at the head of the table, looking around at the faces of his new executive team. He could see a mix of anticipation and curiosity in their eyes. He took a deep breath and began to speak, outlining his vision for the company and the importance of fostering an inclusive culture. "I believe that diversity is not just a checkbox to tick off," he said, his voice steady and confident. "It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued and respected, where different perspectives are not only welcomed but celebrated. We have a responsibility to ensure that our organization reflects the communities we serve." As he spoke, he could see nods of agreement around the table. He encouraged open dialogue, inviting team members to share their thoughts and ideas. The conversation flowed naturally, and Daniel felt a sense of camaraderie building among the group. Throughout the meeting, he emphasized the importance of accountability and transparency. He proposed regular training sessions on diversity and inclusion, as well as initiatives to support underrepresented groups within the company. He wanted to create a culture where everyone felt empowered to speak up and share their experiences. As the meeting came to a close, Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment. He had laid the groundwork for a new culture, one that prioritized inclusivity and respect. He knew that there would be challenges ahead, but he was ready to face them head-on. After the meeting, Daniel received positive feedback from his team. They expressed their enthusiasm for the direction he was taking and their commitment to making the necessary changes. It was a promising start, and Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel continued to work closely with his team to implement the changes he had proposed. They held workshops, created mentorship programs, and established partnerships with organizations that focused on promoting diversity in the workplace. Daniel was determined to lead by example, to show that change was possible and that everyone had a role to play in creating a more inclusive environment. He shared his own experiences with discrimination, using them as teaching moments to help others understand the impact of their actions. One afternoon, as Daniel was reviewing some reports in his office, he received a call from a local news station. They wanted to interview him about the changes he was making within the company and his thoughts on diversity in the workplace. Daniel felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was an opportunity to reach a wider audience, to share his message and advocate for change on a larger scale. He agreed to the interview, knowing that it was a chance to raise awareness about the importance of inclusivity and to inspire others to take action. As he prepared for the interview, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the obstacles he had overcome, and the people who had supported him along the way. The day of the interview arrived, and Daniel stood in front of the camera, ready to share his message. He spoke passionately about the importance of diversity and inclusion, emphasizing that it was not just a moral imperative but also a business necessity. He highlighted the benefits of a diverse workforce, including increased creativity, innovation, and improved decision-making. As he spoke, he could see the interest in the interviewer's eyes. They engaged in a thoughtful conversation, discussing the challenges that still existed in the workplace and the steps that needed to be taken to address them. Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment as he shared his vision for a more inclusive future. After the interview, Daniel received an outpouring of support from colleagues, friends, and even strangers. People reached out to share their own experiences with discrimination and to express their gratitude for his advocacy. It was a powerful reminder of the impact one person could have when they chose to speak up and take action. As the months went by, Daniel continued to push for change within the company and beyond. He became involved in community initiatives, partnering with local organizations to promote diversity and inclusion in schools and workplaces. He spoke at events, sharing his story and encouraging others to join the fight for equality. Through it all, Daniel remained grounded in his values. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he was committed to making a difference. He had faced adversity, but he had also found strength in his community, in his family, and in himself. One evening, as he sat at home with his family, Daniel reflected on how far he had come. He looked around at the faces of his loved ones, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. They had supported him through the challenges, and together they had created a life filled with love and purpose. As he tucked his children into bed that night, he whispered words of encouragement, reminding them to always stand up for what was right and to never let anyone dim their light. He wanted them to know that they had the power to affect change, to challenge the status quo, and to create a better world for themselves and others. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. As the seasons changed, so did Daniel's resolve to make a difference. He became more involved in community outreach programs, partnering with local schools to educate students about the importance of diversity and inclusion. He organized workshops, inviting speakers from various backgrounds to share their experiences and insights. Daniel believed that by fostering understanding and empathy, they could help dismantle the biases that had persisted for far too long. One Saturday morning, Daniel stood in front of a group of high school students in a community center, ready to kick off a workshop on leadership and advocacy. The room was filled with eager faces, a mix of excitement and apprehension in the air. He could see a few familiar faces from his neighborhood, young people who had grown up watching him succeed, and he felt a surge of pride. "Good morning, everyone," Daniel began, his voice warm and inviting. "I'm so glad to see all of you here today. We're going to talk about something that's incredibly important, the power of your voice and the impact you can have on your community." As he spoke, he shared his own journey, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned along the way. He emphasized the importance of standing up for oneself and others, of using their experiences to advocate for change. The students listened intently, their eyes wide with curiosity. "Each of you has the potential to be a leader," Daniel continued, pacing the front of the room. "Leadership isn't just about titles or positions, it's about making a difference, about inspiring others to join you in the fight for justice and equality. It's about recognizing that your voice matters." He encouraged the students to share their own stories, to speak about the challenges they faced in their lives, and how they could use those experiences to drive change. One by one, students began to open up, sharing their struggles with discrimination, bullying, and the pressure to conform to societal expectations. Daniel listened, offering support and guidance, helping them find their voices. As the workshop progressed, Daniel could see the students growing more confident. They began to brainstorm ideas for community projects, ways they could come together to address the issues they cared about. The energy in the room shifted, transforming from uncertainty to empowerment. By the end of the day, Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment. He had witnessed the students come alive, their passion ignited by the conversations they had shared. They were ready to take action, to make their voices heard, and he was proud to have played a part in that transformation. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel continued to mentor the students, guiding them as they launched their community initiatives. They organized rallies, created awareness campaigns, and even started a podcast to discuss issues of race, identity, and social justice. Daniel was amazed by their creativity and determination, and he felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. One evening, as he sat at home reviewing the latest episode of the podcast, Daniel received a call from one of the students, Sarah. "Mr. Wright, you won't believe what just happened," she exclaimed, her voice bubbling with excitement. "We got invited to speak at the city council meeting next week." Daniel's heart raced with pride. "That's incredible, Sarah. You all deserve this opportunity. What will you be discussing?" "We want to present our ideas for a youth mentorship program," she explained. "We think it could really help bridge the gap between different communities and promote understanding." "That's a fantastic idea," Daniel replied, his voice filled with encouragement. "I'll be there to support you. Let's make sure your voices are heard." As the day of the city council meeting approached, Daniel worked closely with the students to prepare their presentation. They practiced their speeches, refined their arguments, and ensured they were ready to face the council members. Daniel reminded them to stay confident, to speak from the heart, and to remember the impact they could have. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere was electric. The students arrived at the city hall, their nerves palpable but their determination unwavering. Daniel stood beside them, offering support and encouragement as they waited for their turn to speak. When their moment finally arrived, the students stepped up to the podium, their voices steady and clear. They presented their ideas with passion, sharing personal stories and statistics that highlighted the need for a mentorship program. The council members listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest. As the presentation concluded, the room erupted into applause. Daniel felt a swell of pride as he watched the students beam with joy, their hard work paying off. The council members began to ask questions, engaging with the students and showing genuine interest in their proposal. After the meeting, Daniel received a flood of messages from friends and colleagues, praising the students for their bravery and eloquence. He knew that this was just the beginning of their journey, but it was a significant step toward creating a more inclusive community. In the weeks that followed, the city council approved the mentorship program, and Daniel was invited to be a part of the initiative. He felt honored to work alongside the students, helping to shape the program and ensure it met the needs of the community. As the program launched, Daniel watched as the students took on leadership roles, mentoring younger kids and fostering connections between different neighborhoods. The impact was profound, and he felt a sense of fulfillment knowing that he had played a part in their journey. One evening, as Daniel sat with his family, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the discrimination he had experienced, and the determination that had fueled his journey. He felt grateful for the support of his loved ones and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. As he tucked his children into bed that night, he whispered words of encouragement, reminding them to always stand up for what was right and to never let anyone dim their light. He wanted them to know that they had the power to affect change, to challenge the status quo, and to create a better world for themselves and others. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. As the years rolled on, Daniel's commitment to advocacy and change only deepened. He became a prominent figure in the community, known not just for his business acumen but also for his unwavering dedication to social justice. His work with the mentorship program flourished, and he began to see the tangible impact of their efforts. The program expanded, reaching more schools and neighborhoods, and Daniel found himself increasingly involved in discussions about policy changes at the local level. He attended town hall meetings, spoke at community events, and collaborated with other organizations focused on promoting diversity and inclusion. One day, while attending a community forum, Daniel was approached by a local journalist, Lisa, who had been following the progress of the mentorship program. "Daniel, your work has been inspiring," she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I'd love to do a feature on you and the program for the local newspaper. It's important for people to see the positive changes happening in our community." Daniel felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had always been more comfortable working behind the scenes, but he understood the importance of sharing their story. "I'd be happy to," he replied, a smile breaking across his face. "But I want to make sure we highlight the students and their experiences. They are the real heroes in this story." As the interview unfolded, Daniel spoke passionately about the program, the students' growth, and the importance of mentorship in fostering a sense of belonging and empowerment. He shared anecdotes of students who had overcome challenges, found their voices, and stepped into leadership roles. Lisa listened intently, her pen flying across the notepad as she captured his words. "It's clear that this program is making a difference," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "But what do you think is the biggest challenge moving forward?" Daniel paused, considering the question. "The biggest challenge is changing mindsets," he said thoughtfully. "We need to continue to educate not just the students but also the adults in our community. Biases are often deeply ingrained, and it takes time and effort to dismantle them. But I believe that through open dialogue and shared experiences, we can create a more inclusive environment for everyone." The article was published a few weeks later, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People from all walks of life reached out to Daniel, expressing their support and interest in getting involved. The mentorship program gained traction, and soon, local businesses began to partner with them, offering internships and job shadowing opportunities for the students. As the program continued to grow, Daniel found himself invited to speak at conferences and panels, sharing his insights on leadership, diversity, and the importance of community engagement. He embraced these opportunities, using his platform to advocate for systemic change and to inspire others to take action. One evening, after a particularly impactful conference, Daniel returned home feeling energized. He sat down with his family, sharing stories from the event and discussing the ideas that had been exchanged. His children listened intently, their eyes wide with admiration for their father's work. "Dad, can we help too?" his daughter asked, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "I want to make a difference like you." Daniel smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "Absolutely. There are so many ways you can get involved. You can volunteer, participate in community events, or even start your own initiatives at school. Every little bit helps." Inspired by their father's passion, his children began to brainstorm ideas for their own projects. They organized a bake sale to raise funds for local charities, volunteered at community cleanup events, and even started a book club focused on diverse literature. As they worked together, Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment. He was not only advocating for change in the community but also instilling those values in his children. He watched as they grew more confident, more aware of the world around them, and more committed to making a difference. One day, while volunteering at a local food bank, Daniel encountered a young man named Malik, who was struggling to find his footing after facing numerous challenges. Malik had recently graduated high school but was unsure of his next steps. Daniel took the time to talk with him, offering guidance and encouragement. "Life can be tough, but it's important to keep pushing forward," Daniel said, his voice steady. "You have the potential to achieve great things. Don't let your circumstances define you." Malik listened, his eyes reflecting a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I want to do something meaningful, but I don't know where to start," he admitted. Daniel smiled, recognizing the familiar struggle. "Start by finding what you're passionate about. Whether it's art, science, or helping others, pursue it with everything you have. And remember, you're not alone. There are people who want to support you." Over the next few months, Daniel mentored Malik, helping him explore his interests and guiding him through the college application process. Malik blossomed under Daniel's guidance, gaining confidence and clarity about his future. As the mentorship program continued to thrive, Daniel realized that the impact of their work extended far beyond the classroom. They were creating a ripple effect, inspiring young people to take charge of their lives and advocate for change in their communities. One evening, as Daniel sat with his family, he reflected on the journey they had taken together. He thought about the challenges they had faced, the victories they had achieved, and the lives they had touched. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support of his loved ones and the opportunity to make a difference. As he tucked his children into bed that night, he whispered words of encouragement, reminding them to always stand up for what was right and to never let anyone dim their light. He wanted them to know that they had the power to affect change, to challenge the status quo, and to create a better world for themselves and others. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. As Daniel's advocacy work gained momentum, he found himself increasingly involved in discussions about policy changes at the local and state levels. He was invited to join a coalition of community leaders, educators, and activists dedicated to addressing systemic inequalities in education and employment. The coalition aimed to create actionable plans that would promote diversity and inclusion across various sectors. One evening, as Daniel prepared for a coalition meeting, he reflected on the progress they had made. The mentorship program had expanded significantly, and they were now partnering with local businesses to provide internships and job opportunities for students from underrepresented backgrounds. The impact was tangible, and Daniel felt a sense of pride in the work they were doing. At the coalition meeting, Daniel sat at a long table surrounded by passionate individuals who shared his vision for a more equitable society. The atmosphere was charged with energy as they discussed their goals and strategies for the upcoming months. "Education is the key to breaking the cycle of poverty," one member stated emphatically. "We need to ensure that every child has access to quality education, regardless of their background." Daniel nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. We also need to focus on creating pathways for success beyond high school. That means not only supporting students academically but also providing them with the resources and mentorship they need to thrive in their careers." As the discussion continued, they brainstormed ideas for community outreach initiatives, workshops, and awareness campaigns. Daniel felt invigorated by the collaboration, knowing that they were all working toward a common goal. After the meeting, Daniel was approached by a young woman named Aisha, who had recently joined the coalition. "I really admire your work with the mentorship program," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "I'd love to get involved and help out in any way I can." "Thank you, Aisha," Daniel replied, smiling. "We're always looking for passionate individuals to join us. Your energy and ideas would be a great addition to the team." Over the next few weeks, Aisha became an integral part of the mentorship program, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas. Together, they organized workshops focused on resume building, interview skills, and networking, empowering students to take charge of their futures. As the program continued to grow, Daniel found himself reflecting on the importance of community. He had always believed that change started at the grassroots level, and he was witnessing that belief come to life. The students were not just participants, they were leaders in their own right, advocating for their peers and challenging the status quo. One day, while attending a community event, Daniel was approached by a local news reporter. "Mr. Wright, can I get a few words about the mentorship program and its impact on the community?" she asked, her notepad ready. Daniel felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had become accustomed to speaking publicly, but he wanted to ensure that the focus remained on the students and their achievements. "Absolutely," he replied, his voice steady. "The mentorship program has been a transformative experience for both the students and the community. We're not just providing support, we're empowering young people to take charge of their futures." As he spoke, he highlighted the stories of individual students who had overcome obstacles and found success through the program. He wanted to showcase their resilience and determination, emphasizing that they were the true heroes of this initiative. The interview aired the following week, and the response was overwhelming. People from all over the community reached out, eager to get involved and support the program. Donations poured in, and local businesses offered to sponsor events and provide resources for the students. Able to expand their initiatives even further. They organized community service projects, college tours, and networking events, creating a robust support system for the students. As the program flourished, Daniel received an invitation to speak at a national conference on diversity and inclusion in education. He felt honored and excited for the opportunity to share their success story on a larger platform. On the day of the conference, Daniel stood in front of a packed auditorium, his heart racing with anticipation. He took a deep breath and began to speak, sharing the journey of the mentorship program and the impact it had made in the community. He emphasized the importance of collaboration, community engagement, and the need for systemic change. As he spoke, he could see the audience engaged, nodding in agreement and taking notes. He felt a sense of purpose wash over him, knowing that he was not just advocating for his community but for all communities facing similar challenges. After his presentation, Daniel was approached by several attendees who expressed their admiration for the work he was doing. They shared their own experiences and challenges, and Daniel felt a sense of solidarity with them. He exchanged contact information with several individuals, eager to collaborate and share ideas. As the conference came to a close, Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. Returning home, Daniel reflected on the journey he had taken. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the people he had met, and the lives he had touched. He felt grateful for the support of his family and the community, knowing that they were all in this together. As he tucked his children into bed that night, he whispered words of encouragement, reminding them to always stand up for what was right and to never let anyone dim their light. He wanted them to know that they had the power to affect change, to challenge the status quo, and to create a better world for themselves and others. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. As the years passed, Daniel's commitment to advocacy and change only deepened. He became a prominent figure in the community, known not just for his business acumen but also for his unwavering dedication to social justice. His work with the mentorship program flourished, and he began to see the tangible impact of their efforts. One evening, as Daniel sat with his family, he reflected on how far he had come. He thought about the challenges he had faced, the discrimination he had experienced, and the determination that had fueled his journey. He felt grateful for the support of his loved ones and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. As he tucked his children into bed that night, he whispered words of encouragement, reminding them to always stand up for what was right and to never let anyone dim their light. He wanted them to know that they had the power to affect change, to challenge the status quo, and to create a better world for themselves and others. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. One day, while attending a community event, Daniel was approached by a young woman who had participated in the mentorship program. "Mr. Wright, I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us," she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You've changed our lives." Daniel felt a swell of pride. "You've all done the hard work," he replied, smiling. "I'm just here to support you. Remember, you have the power to make a difference in your own lives and in the lives of others." As he watched her walk away, Daniel realized that the impact of their work was far-reaching. The students were not just beneficiaries of the program, they were becoming leaders in their own right, advocating for change in their communities and inspiring others to join the fight for equality. With each passing year, Daniel's influence grew, and he became a sought-after speaker at conferences and events across the country. He shared his story, his struggles, and his triumphs, encouraging others to take action and to stand up against injustice. As he stood on stage at a national conference, addressing a crowd of passionate individuals, Daniel felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He was not just advocating for change, he was part of a movement that was transforming lives and communities. "Together, we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect," he said, his voice steady and powerful. "It starts with us, each one of us taking a stand, using our voices, and making a commitment to fight for justice." The audience erupted into applause, and Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. As he left the stage, Daniel was met with a wave of support from attendees eager to connect and collaborate. He exchanged contact information with several individuals, excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. In the years that followed, Daniel continued to advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to inspire others and to drive meaningful change. He knew that the fight for equality was ongoing, but he was ready to face it head-on, armed with the knowledge that together, they could create a brighter future for all. And as he looked out at the faces of the young people he had mentored, he felt a deep sense of pride. They were the future, and he was confident that they would carry the torch of change forward, lighting the way for generations to come.